And in that vein, I'm delighted to welcome the adventurer and TV presenter Alice Morrison to the programme. Her new book, Walking with Nomads, takes the reader on journeys across Morocco from the Sahara to the Atlas Mountains and examines the growing challenge of climate change, even to areas already considered desert. Alice Morrison, welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for being with us. Now, I understand you're in Marrakesh right now.
I am. I'm actually standing. I found a quiet corner-ish of the old Medina. So I'm standing in between the red rose walls, and I've just asked this little group of boys to stop playing football because they were really noisy. So they're like little imps. So they're tucked away around a corner, and they keep going shh to each other. It's very sweet, but they'll get a lollipop at the end.
Oh, that's good. You tweeted earlier that you might be the first person ever to be listening to my show while walking through Marrakesh. And I'd have hoped that you might have bumped into somebody else listening to my show while walking through Marrakesh, and that would be a proper explorer experience. But
It would be amazing.
Look, let's get to the book. You write about setting off into a hidden world. What were you looking for from this hidden world?
Well, my aim was really to cross Morocco and the Sahara from top to toe. So I went from Nador to Guerguerat, and I didn't even know that was my aim when I started. I initially started just walking across the River Dra because it seemed to make sense. You know, it's the longest river in Morocco. It goes across lots of different microclimates, and I'm an adventurer by trade, and it was an adventure. So I set off to really see what I could find. And in fact, the journey was richer genuinely than I could ever have imagined, both in terms of, you know, Indiana Jones type exploring and discovery, and then also in terms of the more serious themes of seeing what was happening to the planet. And lastly, really about what I learned about myself and about my companions and, you know, what you're capable of when you're put under difficult situations.
Well, let's talk about your companions. You were accompanied only by 3 Amazigh Muslim men and their camels. Tell us about that as a travelling party.
Before I set off, the one thing that worried me was that I was going to be lonely. Now, I speak Arabic and I'm learning Tashlahit, which is one of the Amazigh or Berber languages. So it wasn't about communication. It was more that I'm, you know, a woman. It was 3 men. They're very strict, devout Muslims. And really what I was doing is very against their culture because women don't leave. Oh, the call to prayer is just starting if you can hear it. Women don't leave the home and go traipsing across the country with 3 men. So I was worried that they wouldn't accept me and that I'd be kept slightly apart because the culture, you know, here is women and men do socialize apart, really. But the opposite was true. And I had one of those beautiful experiences. It was about day 2. And Brahim was walking ahead with the camels and I was feeling a little bit lost. So I was behind at the back of the camels and he just turned to me and he said, Zahra, they gave me an Arabic name, Zahra. And he said, Zahra, come and walk with me. One hand can't clap. And after that, I was just part of the team. And it was the most joyous, wonderful experience. And those men are now my firm friends. And it just proved to me again, what I do really believe is that human beings, we're all human beings. And all of the things like gender, religion, race, color, they really don't matter in the end. When you're together on an adventure, we made friends with each other and we had an absolutely marvelous time as a result.
Well, let's get to the adventure. Although it sounds like you're having a bit of an adventure in the background there. Look, on your journey along the Dra River, you saw some remarkable things. You write about dinosaur footprints, a lost city, as well as something that you say looked like a map of an ancient spaceship. Tell me about some of them. Okay,
so first I'm going to tell you about the spaceships because this was a very extraordinary experience. So bear in mind, you know, we're walking along. We're trying to discover things as we go, and we got the coordinates of this old prehistoric site, and so went off route to try and find it. And basically, the Dra Valley is a very, very wide valley flanked by high-ish hills. They're mountains by British standards, but they're not really mountains. So we climbed up to a high point, to a plateau, and on this plateau was the most extraordinary structure. Now, we don't, you know, there's nothing much written about these things. So it wasn't like you know, Stonehenge where you can Google it and find everything out. It was basically about 250 meters in span, 2 wings, that's the only way I can describe them, made of large piled stones going up to what was a head with a central, like a little, not a pyramid, but a mound of stones. So everything was built of these stones and rocks. And we are really in a very deserted area. So these stones had to be carried in. It pointed directly west and it was absolutely symmetrical.
Do you have any idea what it was?
Yes, I do, because several months later, I was walking through the Sahara, and I went to meet an Arabic professor of archaeology in Morocco. And he said, these are funerary monuments and they really don't know much about them. They think they were built about 4,000 years ago. It's a kind of a guess. Wow. They all face west and they're really only found in this region, in the Dra region. And there's a few of them, there's about 25 of them that have been found, but there's some way to bury or to commemorate people, but that's what they know. And as I say, there must be some link up with the sun, because they're all pointed exactly towards the setting sun. In the days before GPS and compass.
Yeah.
And it's so thrilling, you know, Hugo, it's the thrill of discovering things for yourself and trying to imagine what they could be. And to me, they looked exactly like the way we see fighting ships in all the Star Wars movies and on Star Trek. I was like, someone has definitely seen a UFO and just copied it.
Tell us about some of the dangers on that part of the journey, the things you had to worry about.
The danger is quite interesting about danger, because the problem with danger is that usually you can worry about things, but they don't happen. What happens is an immediate something you can't predict. And that can kill you. And I think the one of the things that we faced was in the Sahara. We were walking just south of Layoun in the Grand Dunes. And of course, you try not to walk over dunes because they're very high and they're very difficult for the camels. We've got 6 camels. You always try and skirt them because the sand is a bit harder at the bottom and you're not climbing. So we're skirting the dunes and we were going across what is called a sabka. And a sabka is like a flat plain near the sea, surrounded by hills of sand. And it was pure sand. There's absolutely no vegetation whatsoever. And on top, it's quite crunchy. Your feet are onto quite a crunchy part. And we were about a third of a way across this sabka when suddenly ahead of me, we were walking in a formation of 3 camels and 3 camels. And Addi, our youngest team member, who's a nomad, he was walking with his favorite camel, Callum, and 2 others. And suddenly, literally with no warning whatsoever, Callum sank up to his throat in quicksand.
Oh my God.
Yes. And I mean, all that we knew was suddenly that Callum and the other 2 camels were screaming and roaring. They roar like lions. And it was this sound of an animal in absolute fear and panic and distress. A big bull camel like roaring and screaming. And because the camels are tied together with halters around the bottom of their mouths and then tied to the next one just to keep them in caravan, Callum was pulling the second camel behind him down with him. Now, it was within a second, suddenly this camel is in danger of death, the most horrible way, and of the second camel also dying. So the only reason I think that we managed to get out of that was Addi has got a really strong bond with Callum, because he's his camelteer. He's walked with him for years. And he, you know, when you walk with animals, when you use animals in that way, you grow to love them and you go to know them, and you do develop a bond of trust with them. And he's also a very strong young man, and he basically yanked Callum up by his chin, his throat, yanked him up, and Callum worked with him, and they pulled themselves out of this quicksand and onto the hard sand.
My God.
And it was that moment, and you know, I won't tell you all the details, they're all in the book, but we walked back, we retraced our footsteps, and all the men, of course, were Alhamdulillah Salama, which means thanks be to God for a safe delivery, because for them, everything is written. And it did feel like God was with us, because we did manage to get out of it, thanks also to the efforts of Addi. But it's those moments of danger, we could never have predicted that. It just suddenly happened, and then we had to react.
Completely remarkable. Look, I have to ask you about the climate and climate change and the perspective that you had. I mean, as you're traveling along, say, a dried out riverbed, I mean, you must be, even though you're in a desert, you must be acutely conscious of climate, right?
Absolutely. And I think for me, it was a very big turning point. Of course, I know about climate change. I'm an educated person. I live in Morocco. So, you know, it's not something I'm unaware of or that I don't care about. I really care about it. But the experience of walking and not being able to find water to drink or for our animals to drink was kind of crucifying. We were for the end of the dry expedition and the beginning of the Sahara expedition, crossing the Sahara, in fact, the whole of the Sahara, we were under constant water stress. And what that means is that you are constantly thinking about where can you get your next water from, and you're constantly having to plan how long have we got until our water runs out. Now, if you like, I was doing something that was my choice, that I wanted to do, that was planned. We'd organized it. We knew what we were doing. But imagine if you were living in that situation when you are constantly anxious about your water supplies. And that's what I witnessed.
And it's
so for the nomads,
it's getting a lot worse for nomads looking for water, presumably.
It is. I mean, basically that part of the desertification is growing at a rate of 16% per annum worldwide. That region, the Sahel, that belt of North Africa, is drying up. It still houses the camel nomads, the Sahrawis, people of Sahara, who still herd their 200, 300 herds of camels. They still live off the meat and the milk. But now they have to get their water brought into them by truck from the big cities, and they store it in these absolutely enormous plastic bags, which are enough for them to live on and for their camels to drink until the next supplies come. So people are adapting. But the second thing, without any rainfall, without any water, the shrubs have dried out. And when you think of the Sahara, you probably think of all those clean sands, but in most of the Sahara, there is small shrubs, very prickly, very thorny, very hardy, but those are now drying out as well. And when that happens, the nomads can no longer sustain their animals and they have to move.
Wow. Look, I mean, there's so much more I'd like to ask you. I'm afraid we're out of time. But in 20 seconds, do I want to ask you about the saliva shower from Hamish the camel, or because it's Saturday lunchtime, should we give that a miss?
No, definitely ask me. So my male camels were all on heat when we were walking, because it's males who go on heat. And the way they show their love is they blow a big pink bubble out the side of their mouths, like a huge bubblegum bubble, and it's filled with saliva. So when you're walking beside them, you get constantly showered in sex saliva.
Wow. Well, what a way to end an interview, and indeed a show. Alice Morrison, thank you very much indeed. That book, Walking with Nomads, is out now. And Alice, thanks very much indeed for coming on to tell us about it. And enjoy Marrakesh. Now, look.
Thank you.